Useless Monster by Mutkos. Chapter 4, or Chapter 3. Yagi felt like he just got ripped down from whatever position he held in the world by the boy in front of him. What the heck was he supposed to say to that? It was the most jarring thing any civilian has ever said to him. He knows he didn't cough up anything yet, and he only has minutes until he runs out of time at all. He's still reeling when he feels a foreign tug in his remaining lung and around his scarred side before his aches start to pull out of him. It was a distinct pulling sensation in the direction of the boy. The shock increases exponentially when the boy starts coughing harshly and coughing up the blood that should be in his own lung. The kid doubled over and hacked up enough to splatter on the ground, wheezing slightly before coughing up more and clutching at his left side. He felt the flicker of the flame that was one for all waver, a warning that he was about to run out of time. Still, he couldn't leave the boy like this, not when he had just healed Yagi in a way that a very select few were even aware was an issue. He had no way of knowing how the kid even figured it out, but he felt a certain spark in the child. This kid nearly died, and immediately started trying to help another, one he had no reason to believe needed help from the outside eye. He had so many questions that would have to wait for the moment as he looked around collecting the bag and waterlogged notebook before scooping up the boy. Blood speckled his shirt when the small frame shook and hacked against his arms. If anyone happened to glimpse them in the air, he could use the excuse of taking him to a hospital to get picked up by family, not that All Might would need an excuse in the eyes of the public. He took a bit of extra care when he leapt towards the sheriff's station. The sludge villain still needed to be turned in, after all, and he didn't want to carry the bottles longer than necessary. The flame inside flickered violently, and Yagi started looking for a roof to land on. He made a running landing to lessen the impact some, and carefully set the boy down on his feet. They stood in silence for a few heartbeats. Questioning eyes looked him over, and Yagi couldn't help but ask,
"How did you know?"
Izuku forced his lungs to take in the most air that they could, the burning strips of lung ever so slowly piecing themselves shut. He took special care to hold back any coughing as he looked over All Might. The man was still straining somehow.
"How did you know?"
There was a subtle vulnerability in the question. Understandable, considering Izuku had just figured out what must be a massive secret, since the public has absolutely no knowledge of All Might sustaining any sort of injury this severe. "It's my quirk!" Izuku looked at his bag and book that had been set next to him. He leaned down and put the book in his bag before slipping it on. His brain ran through stupid questions of his chance at being a hero. He knew the answer already. Izuku had no way of being a hero remotely similar to the beacon that was before him. He was cursed to be in the shadows since before he could remember. He was fully aware of the monster hunts that had been happening since his slip-up last year. The school and library computers replayed his discovery over and over from multiple angles, even the part where he shot past Eraserhead and Present Mike to escape. Someone online even claimed to have possession of the quill he had torn from his body. The videos caught like wildfire in a drought and spread everywhere. Forums had cropped up trying to figure out what he was. Conspiracies of some government slip-up, cryptids, lost gods, and so on. It was a mess. Yet he was still foolish enough to want to try for UA in the wake of it all.
"What exactly is your quirk, my boy? What does it do?"
For such a large man, Izuku could appreciate the lowered volume. "I can sense pain, the physical kinds, and pull them to myself. It lets me heal people even from a distance." The strain was getting frustrating. Izuku couldn't remove it from All Might. He already tried to. His brow furrowed slightly as he tried to puzzle it out. The ache from the straining was getting worse. It was like a peak was approaching, and soon.
"What?"
"All Might, sir, I don't know what you are straining so hard for, but can you please let it go?" Izuku twisted his hands into the hem of his shirt as he interrupted his hero. The surprise was blatantly spread across his face at being cut off. A pause. Then he cautiously nodded.
"Okay."
Izuku felt how the strain slipped away as the steam rose from the hulking form before him. Then the strain was gone, along with the buff figure that was All Might. In his place was a skeleton of a man. Izuku huffed out a small noise of laughter. "They always say to never meet your idols, don't they? Something about them not living up to the ideals." He fixed the man with a small wry smile. "Thank you." All Might gave him a lopsided smile of his own as he sat and leaned against the edge of the roof. He looked to be considering something and chuckled quietly as he shook his head.
What a strange day. I assume you have questions of your own, my boy.
I do. I don't need answers, though. I've done nothing to deserve them. I have healed a lot of people without questioning the reasons behind the wounds. He smoothed out his shirt and looked over the red stains on the white of his undershirt. It would be tedious to remove. The sun was comfortably warm as wind drifted by. Izuku looked over the rooftops around them. He was very familiar with this area of town, acquainted with every back street, alley, and detour to get around any busy or noisy streets for both night and daytime. They stayed there in a calm silence. It was a surprisingly open one, in Izuku's opinion.
Well, I must be on my way, my boy. I have to drop off this villain at the station. Would you like to join me?
All Might stood and dusted his pants off, turning to Izuku with a smile. Not that Izuku saw, his attention very pointedly at a fixed spot in the distance. He could feel it. The frighteningly familiar ache of explosive palms and tensed forearms from overuse, except this time it was in the company of a searing fight for oxygen Izuku vividly remembers experiencing less than an hour ago. Bakugo was fighting for his life! I have to go! Izuku didn't even look at All Might. He hears All Might call him again, clearly curious about the dead-set focus Izuku had, but he didn't respond. He couldn't. He had to get to Bakugo, and fast, and there was only one way for him to do it. Screw decisions made in days past, he needed to help! He stumbled at first, body moving on its own more than he was guiding it as he ran to the edge of the roof. All Might's voice grew panicked, ending in a shout as Izuku leapt off of the roof, not caring about the massive fall. He let go on the way down, and the burst of the change was sharp from lack of active use, but not painful. Claws dug painfully into the wall of the building just in time to slow him down from a fall that may have broken bones. He could feel the gritty sensation of them tearing slightly at their roots, but not ripping out entirely. The moment his feet hit the ground, he bolted as fast as he could towards the feeling of a slipping breath, drawing out calls of shock and a few screams of the people he bolted past on the streets. It felt like he was taking too long, but there were occasional glances of relief through the pain. Somehow Bakugo was managing slight gasps of air, and it was giving Izuku the precious time he needed to get there. Was there no hero close enough to help him? Was it another slime villain? Now that he thought about it, he doesn't remember the bottles he had originally seen with All Might after they landed on the roof. Twisting around a corner, he spotted a crowd of people watching the growing fires that came from large explosions at the hand of a student. Heroes stood at the edge of the fires trying to evacuate the civilians from the buildings or keep back the crowd, but none made any move towards his classmate. He could feel the pain dulling. Bakugo was losing consciousness. Fear pushed him to leap over the crowd, doing his best to ignore the shouts of surprise and screams of fear at his appearance. The sludge villain turned and his eyes widened in a mix of stunned fear and confusion, hold on Bakugo slackening enough for red eyes to clear and gasping breaths to be taken. What the heck? Izuku screamed over him as he plunged his arms into the body of the villain and grasped at whatever parts of Bakugo he could reach. The crowd was growing, people who had trailed the monster arriving in a steady flow. They were shouting loud over the calls of the heroes who tried to hold them out of range of the fires. Izuku's mind was racing as he tried to figure out what his next move was. He wasn't even sure what his next move was. He just ran through the burning in his torn-up lungs, desperate to help in any way possible and keep Bakugo alive. The massive talons of his larger lower set of arms ripped at the sludge as his hands dragged a rage-filled and shouting Bakugo out of the thick fluid and threw him out of the villain's reach. The villain was shouting profanity at Izuku, and he just screamed back, tears welling up as he clawed and tried to wriggle his way out of the grip it was getting on him. For as much as Izuku told himself he needed to stop making rash decisions, he never seemed to take a hint. Then a familiar strain was back in the crowd, and Izuku felt his stomach drop. He registers the call of one of All Might's moves and braces as best he can before he's sent flying by the wind pressure. The sludge villain splattered against the wall, and Izuku tried hopelessly to right himself in the swirling air. He lands wrong. The crisp snap of a green stick fracture in his arm left him hissing and rolling with his landing, shoulders and hip jarring painfully before he struggled to stand and run out of sight. He hoped to whatever was out there that All Might didn't see where he landed, knowing it was probably a pointless wish. Izuku rushed into the nearest alleyway that would get him on track out of the city proper, and grasped for his human form the moment he was out of sight of the road. It hurt to change back with broken bones, but he needed to get away. He's barely gotten to his human feet, the last of sparse fur disappearing right as All Might landed in the alley. I really need to stop getting cornered by heroes in alleyways. Izuku held his arm up to his chest in a lame attempt of hiding it. The strained pain in All Might was practically vibrating with how strongly it rolled off his body. He sniffed quietly as he wiped away his tears with his good hand, watching the confusion spread across his face. Please, let me go. I promise I won't change again. Gachan was dying and they weren't doing anything. I could feel it. I didn't hurt anyone, you saw. I just couldn't let him die. I couldn't. Izuku fought down the sobs that threatened to come to the surface as he backed away from All Might. He didn't want to be caught. He was so afraid of being caught when all he wanted to do was help people and live whatever minimal life he could achieve.
Was that creature you, my boy?
He could see the gears turning in All Might's head as he shakily nodded. No point in lying now. Broken laughter followed the tears that returned to his eyes. He could hear sirens approaching, officers following a hero to gather his capture. It doesn't matter what kind of hero I want to be, does it? It doesn't matter how hard I try or how badly I want to be one, because that's all I am, all anyone sees and will ever see, right? A monster. All that I am or ever will be is a monster. His heart pounded in his chest as the sirens got closer. He wasn't deaf to the fear and pain and loneliness in his voice. He had accepted his place in life long ago. It was his ignorantly hopeful heart that kept getting him into train wrecks like this. All Might may be the #1 hero, but even that title wouldn't change the lot Izuku was given in life. Yagi looked at the injured boy in front of him, the boy he injured, as tears streamed down his face, blood trickling from scrapes. The familiar dribble of blood from the corner of his mouth, a blatant tell of the fact that he did in fact take on the full extent of irritation in his lungs. Green eyes pleaded just as loudly as his words. This kid was holding a weight and a deep-rooted fear no child his age should be carrying. Yagi's expression crumpled in time with the billowing steam that poured from his body. He looked back at the alley's entrance and with a careful hand reached out and took the boy's good arm to lead him away. He went as fast as he dared, with a strong limp slowing down the boy that continued to shock him in many different ways. After a few instances of backtracking, the boy shook his head and took lead, confidently winding through multiple small alleys and gaps between nested buildings and stores. Yagi took this in stride as best he could as he tried to piece together the wildly confusing case that was pulling him by the hand past every busy or crowded street with practiced ease. A practice that spoke of many days and nights hiding or on the run. This kid was a deeply intricate puzzle, but his core drives were laid out like an open book. The boy was a natural hero, buried by the fear he carried and the strange affliction he was dealing with. He hadn't really gotten a good look at what the creature had looked like, but some of the crowd apparently recognized him if the snippets of conversation he caught were to be believed. The boy stumbled slightly, and Yagi did his best to steady him. His eyes flicked back behind him, bright with fear, before he pressed on faster. The sound of a crowd was growing louder, and he was pretty sure that they had been trying to avoid such a place up until now. The boy let go of his hand and slipped down a side street, Yagi following close behind. The sight of a train station was not what he expected when they stepped onto the road proper. People of all sorts walked by in different directions, and he looked down in confusion. The boy wiped away the remnants of his tears and cleared his throat. You did your job. You need to go do the report or something that goes with it, right? This train station goes pretty much everywhere, and I need... People had phones out again. I need to hide. Again. Anxious energy had the green-haired boy tapping a foot rapidly as he scanned the crowd. He took a step and Yagi felt his heart drop in dismay.
Wait.
The boy turned to him, mirroring the confusion Yagi felt. Not sure what exactly his plan had been asking for him to wait. He just held out a hand.
Yagi.
He hoped to at least get some kind of name from the boy, anything really. Green eyes widen slightly in surprise before he smiles. It's small, soft, and just barely there as he shakes his hand briefly. Midoriya! Goodbye, Yagi-san, and thank you. He waved, and then Green vanished into the bustling crowd before Yagi could reply. He looked around the station before he looked at his own hand, brain still trying to organize any possible train of thought. When it finally got any semblance of coherency, the first thing to cross his mind was how this boy Midoriya would be an ideal heir to his legacy. The whole shape-shifting thing was unexpected, but his moral drive that Yagi had witnessed so far had far exceeded what he had even originally hoped to find at UA. He would have to try and find the boy again. He took the long way to a large and tree-filled park, knowing a train full of people was the last place he wanted to be. Just hearing people discuss videos of his monstrous form left him strung out beyond belief. He was hurting more than he was planning to today. The green stick fracture was a hell of a punch to his energy levels and put his arm out of commission until it healed, something that would make him unable to work. Oh, Lord. I hope they don't drop me for not coming in at all. I've lost too many jobs to an accidental or unplanned no-show. A frown settles over his face. He doesn't know how long his body will take to heal, and he isn't quite sure if he will be able to pull off looking uninjured in class tomorrow. If it heals too slowly, he might have to skip tomorrow's work as well to let his body kick-start into a faster healing process. That isn't even bringing into the picture that All Might Yagi-san, as he's learned, now knows what he is. Izuku even gave him his real last name. It should have put him on edge as much as it is, but he couldn't really help it. No one has bothered to truly help or even try to protect him in any way for years. Nearly a decade. Only time will tell if Yagi-san will keep his precious secret. He stood under a somewhat tall tree and sighed heavily. The branches were dense enough for him to rest and hide in as long as no one took a particularly long look. All he had to do was figure out how to climb it so he could sleep.